The gavel cracked like thunder inside the Lagos Federal High Court. Cameras blinked, pens hovered, every seat was full, international observers in dark suits, journalists with recorders raised, law students packed along the walls. In the front row sat Andrew John, founder and CEO of Jontech, in white kaftan, hands clasped so tight, his knuckles turned white. On the witness table, his lawyer, Johnson, rose slowly, sweat on his brow, files in a shaky hand. Across from him, Nattech's counsel, Barrister Henry, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with silver glasses, stood tall and calm. "My lord," Barrister Henry said, voice smooth. "This case is simple. Jontech stole Nattech's prototype. They stole it through Mr. David Okafor, our former lead engineer, who resigned and ran to them. Days later, Jontech announced Project Nova and built the very drone we designed first. We seek $1 billion for intellectual theft." A murmur rolled through the court. Andrew stared at the table, heart pounding. He had built Jontech from a tiny bedroom in Festac to a multi-billion-dollar company known across Africa. He had built apps that sent school lessons to remote villages in native languages. He had created cheap solar tablets that survived dusty classrooms in rural and schools. Then came Project Nova, the fast, quiet security drone that helped police find kidnappers and other criminals in forest hideouts without risking officers' lives. And now this. "My lord," Johnson said, clearing his throat. "The fact that David joined Jontech does not mean we stole anything." There was silence. The judge, a middle-aged man with a controlled face, Justice Bamidele, tilted his head. "Is that your response to the evidence?" Johnson fumbled with a file. Papers slipped, fluttering like tired birds. We deny the theft. There is no proof that Jontech took a prototype." Barrister Henry's lips curved. "No proof? We have email timestamps. We have David's resignation letter. We have the timeline Nattech halted work after David left. Jontech announced Nova days later." "My lord, the times align like train tracks." Johnson's voice shrank. "Joining a rival is not a crime." Andrew felt the floor tilt. He could hear the cameras clicking. He could hear his own breath. $1 billion. If they lost, it would crush Jontech's future. Hundreds of engineers. Tens of thousands of students who used his learning apps every day. Investors, partners, everything. The judge leaned back. "Counsel for the defense. Do you wish to cross-examine or present counter-evidence?" Johnson glanced at Andrew, then at his empty hands. We will rely on our pleadings, my lord." The air in the courtroom cooled. Even the journalists stopped scribbling. Johnson sat down, eyes on the floor. Andrew's stomach dropped. Justice Bamidele looked over his glasses. "Very well. Before I take submissions, does anyone else have anything useful to say?" A voice from the back, gentle but clear. "I do, my lord." Heads turned. A man stood up slowly in the last row. His coat was torn at the sleeve. His hair was overgrown and rough. His beard was a knot of grey and black. Some people near him covered their noses. The man pressed a folded newspaper to his chest like a treasure. "I have something to say," he repeated, careful and respectful. "I have evidence that Jontech did not steal Nattech's prototype." Security looked unsure. Barrister Henry frowned. Johnson blinked, confused. Justice Bamidele studied the man. "Name?" Sam, he said. "Sir, approach." The court rustled as Sam walked down the aisle. His shoes were worn out at the heels. His steps were steady. Andrew watched him and felt the strangest calm. The man's eyes, though tired, were clear and kind. Sam stopped at the front. "With your permission, my lord." The judge nodded. "Speak." Sam held up the newspaper. "My lord, the learned counsel for Nattech is wrong to say Jontech stole anything simply because Mr. David Okafor resigned. On this paper published last year, Mr. David gave an interview. He complained that Nattech slashed his salary by 40% without warning. He said his official car was auctioned and not replaced. He said, on record, that he might leave if a better offer came. A small wave of gasps spread through the gallery. And, Sam continued, opening the paper carefully, on page 20 of this same paper, Jontech's spokesperson, Mr. Anderson Chukwudi, who is present in court, spoke about Project Nova. He said Jontech planned a drone program for Africa's safety. My lord, That was a year ago, when Mr. David was still with Nattech. Johnson's head jerked up. Andrew felt his chest fill with air for the first time all day. Barrister Henry raised a hand. Objection, my lord. Who is this man? A stranger. This is not a proper witness. He is not on any list. What is this trial by newspaper? Justice Bamidele narrowed his eyes. Counsel, sit. I will decide what is helpful. He turned back to Sam. Why should I listen to you? Sam's voice softened. Because truth is not about suits, my lord. It is about time and facts. The timing is the spine of their case. If Project Nova existed on the record before Mr. David Okafor left Nattech, then the spine is broken. The judge studied him for a long second, then reached for his pen. Proceed. Hours earlier, before the gavel, before the panic, Lagos was waking up. Andrew had stood on his balcony in Ikoyi, staring at the pale water of the lagoon. His phone lay face down on the table. He could not look at the messages. $1 billion suit. Breaking news banners. Headlines that read like final nails. He thought of his first office. One wooden desk, a fan that squeaked, and a laptop that overheated. He thought of the first time a village teacher called to say the literacy app helped a class of 30 children read in 6 weeks. He thought of the first rescue with Nova, when kidnappers were caught without a shot and a crying mother hugged him till his chest hurt. He thought of Jonathan Namdi of Nattech, older, established, always ahead, who smiled for cameras but hissed in boardrooms. A rival who thought time gave him a crown no newcomer should touch. A knock. Johnson came in, eyes tired. We'll be fine, he said, too quickly. Nattech is noisy, we'll be fine. Andrew looked at him. He heard the words, but he also heard the spaces between them thin and shaky. Do we have proof that Nova was in motion before David left Nattech? Andrew asked. Johnson hesitated. We have. Press mentions. We will argue the timeline is not proof of theft. Do we have the press in hand? I'll find it. Andrew nodded and did not exhale. Back in court, Barrister Henry glided through his story. David left. Nova appeared. Nattech suffered. Jontech made billions. He spoke like a master tailor, threading points with quiet ease. He even smiled at the journalists as if the cameras were his witnesses too. Johnson stood and sat and stood, offering thin lines that broke like chalk. Andrew kept searching the faces around him. Investors, staff, teachers who had flown in to support him. He found Anderson in the second row, Jontech's spokesperson, twisting his tie. He found at the back a man with a tattered coat and a folded paper. The man kept watching everyone, not with judgment, but with care. When Johnson choked on a sentence, the man's jaw tightened. When Barrister Henry said, "Theft again," the man's fingers tightened on the paper. Then came the judge's question. Does anyone else have anything useful to say? And the man rose. Now, at the front, Sam turned the newspaper to page 20. His fingers were gentle, as though the paper might feel pain. He placed it on the court's document camera. The screen lit up. The headline in bold, Jontech eyes Project Nova for Safer Africa spokesperson, Anderson Chukwudi. The date stamp, 1 year ago. A soft, shocked sound swept through the court. And here, Sam said, turning a page, the interview with Mr. David. He tapped the quote with a finger. I may leave if the right offer comes. I can't keep working where my pay is cut by 40% and my car is taken. The masthead and date were clear. Justice Bamidele leaned forward, reading every word. Barrister Henry pressed his lips together. Johnson's mouth opened, then closed. Andrew felt something rise in his throat, hope sharp and bright. Sam looked up. My lord, if Nova was already planned and publicly stated before Mr. David left Nattech, then Nattech's timeline breaks. And if Mr. David had long said he might leave because of unfair treatment, then his leaving cannot be painted as secret, sudden, or bought. Where is the proof of stolen prototype? Where is any payment? The burden is heavy, my lord. They have not carried it. The room was very quiet. Justice Bamidele tapped his pen on the desk. Once, twice. That is interesting, he said. Barrister Henry shot up. Objection. This is irregular. He is not counsel. He is a citizen who reads, the judge said, eyes still on the paper. He turned to Nattech's table. Counsel, do you dispute this date? Do you dispute that John Tech spoke about Nova 1 year ago? Henry hesitated for the first time. We request time to verify authenticity. Sam lifted another folded sheet. I have 2 more copies from different vendors, my lord. Same date. Same quotes. And then, suddenly, Johnson lunged. It was a fast, clumsy move, born of panic, not plan. He grabbed for the newspaper as if the page were a match threatening to burn him. A gasp burst from the gallery. The bailiff jumped. The paper slipped, skidding across the polished desk. Mr. Johnson. Justice Bamidele's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down now. Security surged forward. Andrew half rose from his chair, stunned. Sam stepped back, eyes steady, hand still open, as if offering truth rather than fighting for it. The judge's gavel slammed the wood. Order! Order! The hall froze. Justice Bamidele glared over the rim of his glasses, face stern, voice low and dangerous. Counsel, 1 more stunt and you will be held in contempt. This court will see the truth, whether it is tidy or not. He turned to Sam. Mr. Sam, proceed, show me exactly where that interview says Mr. David planned to leave Nattech. Read it aloud to the court. Sam drew a breath, placed a finger on the line, and the courtroom doors swung open with a bang as a late camera crew pushed in, lights blazing straight at the bench. Everything exploded into noise. The courtroom lights flared as the new camera crew barged in, their equipment rattling like drums in a parade. Journalists hissed in protest. Security moved quickly, blocking them from getting too close. Justice Bamidele's gavel came down hard again. Order in court, he thundered. His voice echoed against the marble walls. Any more disturbance, and I will clear this hall. The lights dimmed as the crew was forced to the side, their cameras pointed away from the judge. The silence that followed was heavy. All eyes returned to Sam, the ragged man in the torn coat, still standing with the newspaper in hand. Now, the judge said, calmer but stern. Read it aloud. Sam cleared his throat, his deep voice carrying without a microphone. If the right offer comes, I will leave Nattech, Mr. David said in frustration. My salary was reduced by 40% without explanation. My car was taken and never replaced. I feel betrayed by the company I served with my skill and sweat. The words cut through the courtroom like a knife. Some gasped. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Andrew felt the knot in his chest loosen. Just a little. For the first time since the case began, hope flickered inside him. Barrister Henry stood, face stiff, but his confident tone cracked slightly. My lord, this is a distraction. Even if Mr. David complained about his treatment, it does not erase the possibility of intellectual theft. Sam turned toward him slowly. His beard was tangled, his eyes sunken, but his gaze was sharp. Learned counsel, he said softly. Your entire argument rests on timing that Nova appeared after Mr. David left Nattech. But this proves Nova existed before. If the foundation of your case is broken, what else is left standing? The gallery murmured again. Justice Bamidele leaned back in his chair. His eyes flicked from Henry to Sam, then to Andrew, who sat frozen, hands trembling. Mr. Andrew John, the judge said, did your company indeed announce Project Nova before Mr. Okafor's resignation? Andrew swallowed hard, then rose. Yes, my lord. It was part of our public vision for safer Africa. Anderson Chukwudi, our spokesperson, gave the interview last year. Is Mr. Chukwudi present? A slim man in glasses stood quickly from the second row. Yes, my lord. The judge pointed at the witness stand. Then we will hear you under oath. Anderson stepped forward, voice shaking but determined. It's true, I spoke with this same newspaper. I announced John Tech's plans for Nova months before David Okafor resigned from Nattech. We had already filed preliminary patents. Nova was never stolen. The words hung in the air like a verdict. For the first time, Barrister Henry's face betrayed doubt. He shuffled his papers, searching for a way to stitch his case back together. Johnson, Andrew's own lawyer, slumped in his seat, sweat dripping down his neck. He looked like a man watching his career burn in front of him. And Sam, the homeless man, stood quietly, his fingers resting on the folded newspaper, as if he had been waiting all along for this moment. Justice Bamidele tapped his pen. This new testimony will be admitted. Counsel for Nattech, you will have time to respond. For now, this court acknowledges the record that John Tech publicly announced Project Nova before Mr. David's resignation. The murmurs grew louder. Journalists scribbled furiously. Andrew lowered himself into his chair, chest heaving. He looked at Sam, standing tall, though his clothes were ragged. Their eyes met. Andrew mouthed the words, "Thank you." Sam gave the smallest nod, but as relief began to creep into Andrew's heart, he noticed something odd. Johnson, his own lawyer, was glaring at Sam. Not with gratitude, but with hatred. The man's jaw was tight, his fists clenched. Andrew's smile faltered. The judge rose. "This court will adjourn until tomorrow morning. Evidence must be reviewed. We will continue then." The gavel slammed. The crowd erupted. Reporters pushed forward with microphones. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Andrew's staff hurried to shield him as security officers guided him toward the exit. Yet through the chaos, his gaze never left Sam, the homeless stranger, who had just saved his empire with a single newspaper. And as Andrew watched, he saw something else. Johnson, lingering by the bench, eyes dark, staring at Sam as though he had just declared war. Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting, painting the Lagos skyline in orange fire. Cars honked. Street vendors called. The courthouse steps were swarmed with journalists shouting questions. "Mr. Andrew, do you think John Tech will win? Was that man really homeless? Who is Sam?" Andrew said nothing. Cameras flashed as he stepped into his black SUV. Inside, silence filled the car. His aides whispered nervously, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Finally, Andrew spoke. His voice was quiet but certain. "Find that man for me. Tonight, I want to know who he is." The SUV pulled away, leaving the court behind. Back in the shadows of the courthouse, Sam sat on the edge of the steps, ignored by the crowd. The newspaper was folded neatly on his lap. People brushed past him without a glance, but Sam's eyes weren't on them. He was staring into the distance, lost in memories he had buried long ago. Memories of a courtroom, a powerful politician, and a day when his world had been destroyed in blood. And behind him, near the pillars, Johnson stood quietly, watching him. His lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. Because while the court would resume tomorrow, Johnson had already decided Sam was not going to see the end of this case. The night in Lagos was restless. Streetlights buzzed and flickered as Danfo buses rumbled past, horns blaring in the thick traffic. On Awolowo Road, Andrew sat alone on the balcony of his mansion, a glass of water in his hand. He should have felt relief. The stranger's words had shifted the case in his favor, but instead, his mind replayed Johnson's face, that glare, that clenched jaw, the way his lawyer looked at Sam, not like a savior, but like an enemy. Andrew leaned back, eyes on the dark sky. Why would Johnson hate the man who saved us? Across town, under the Falamo Bridge, Sam curled up on a torn mat. The air was heavy with smoke from roadside barbecue stands and the sharp smell of diesel. Other homeless men muttered in their sleep. But Sam didn't sleep. He stared at the stars peeking faintly through the smog, the folded newspaper still clutched to his chest. His mind traveled backward, to another courtroom, another gavel, another day when he had stood with fire in his voice and the law on his side. He had once been a rising star in the legal world. He remembered the day he won against a powerful politician accused of looting billions. The people had cheered. Justice had felt alive. And that night, his family was gone. His wife, his 2 children, his aged parents, all killed in what the police called an armed robbery. But Sam knew better. It was punishment. That was the day he dropped the law books and walked into the streets, never to return. His eyes burned with tears now, but he wiped them quickly. "No weakness, Sam," he muttered to himself. Not again. He didn't know that a pair of eyes was watching him from the shadows, a tall figure leaning against a rusted pole. It was Johnson. The next morning, Andrew's SUV rolled up to the courthouse again. Reporters swarmed, flashing cameras and shouting questions. Andrew ignored them, his mind elsewhere. "Boss," his aide whispered, "we found the man. The homeless one." Andrew's heart skipped. "Where is he?" "He's under Falamo Bridge." "Should we bring him?" Andrew hesitated. "No. Let me see him after court. Alone." Inside the courtroom, the tension was sharp enough to cut. Barrister Henry looked tired, his arguments wobbling as he tried to rebuild Natek's case. The judge, Justice Bamidele, was patient but stern, reminding him that mere suspicion was not evidence. Sam sat again at the back, quieter this time, his eyes scanning every word, every gesture. He had not intended to return, but something inside him told him he must finish what he had started. When Johnson stood to speak, his voice was colder than before. "My lord, while this newspaper has been presented, we must remember truth can be staged. Publications can be planted. Perhaps John Tech orchestrated this entire interview 1 year ago, knowing one day it might shield them from a case such as this." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Andrew froze. Was Johnson undermining his own company? Was he fighting the company that employed him? Justice Bamidele's eyes narrowed. "Counsel, are you suggesting fraud without evidence?" Johnson hesitated, then bowed. "Withdrawn, my lord," but his glance shot towards Sam again, dark, full of warning. Andrew's chest tightened. He made up his mind. After today, Johnson was finished. Later, when the court adjourned for the day, and Sam had left the court before Andrew called for him, Andrew instructed his driver to head toward Falomo Bridge. The SUV slowed in the dim underpass where smoke from Akara cellars rose into the night. There, on a mat, sat Sam. Andrew stepped out, ignoring the curious looks of passers-by. He walked to Sam and crouched. "You saved my life yesterday," Andrew said softly. "And you don't even know me." Sam looked up, eyes tired but steady. "I know enough. I know you built something that helps people, and I know lies when I hear them." Andrew swallowed. "Come with me. Let me help you." Sam shook his head. "I don't belong in your world anymore." "Yes, you do," Andrew insisted. "You belonged there long before I did." For a long moment, Sam stared at him. His hands trembled slightly. He hadn't heard words like that in years. Finally, he nodded. Andrew stood and extended his hand. Sam took it slowly, rising to his feet. For the first time in years, he stood tall beside someone who believed in him. What neither of them saw was Johnson's black sedan parked across the road. Inside, Johnson's face was twisted in rage. He dialed a number. "It's time. Tonight. Make sure that man never steps in court again." Hours later, as Andrew's SUV rolled into his mansion with Sam beside him, the city outside was alive with horns and chatter. Sam stared out the window, overwhelmed by the sudden change of fate. He couldn't help but think of his wife, his children, his parents all gone. Andrew placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tomorrow, I want you to stand beside me in court again. Not as a stranger, as my defender." Sam's lips parted. The old fire in his chest flickered to life. He nodded, but while hope glowed in Andrew's mansion, in the shadows of Lagos, Johnson's hired men loaded weapons into a black SUV. Their target was Sam, and by dawn, blood would either fall or justice would rise. The mansion was quiet that night. Chandeliers glowed softly, casting golden circles across the marble floors. From the balcony, Lagos twinkled with restless lights, the hum of traffic faint in the distance. Inside, Andrew poured 2 glasses of juice and set one in front of Sam, who now sat clean-shaven, his tangled beard trimmed, his hair cut short. A fresh white shirt and black trousers replaced his torn coat. "You don't look like the man I saw in court yesterday," Andrew said with a smile. Sam managed a faint chuckle. "Clothes don't change the scars inside, Andrew." Andrew leaned forward, voice firm. "Then let me help with the scars. Tomorrow, you won't just be a stranger at the back of the court. You'll be my defender. Sit by me. Speak if you must. The world will hear you again." Sam's throat tightened. His hands trembled around the glass. He had sworn never to stand in a courtroom again, not after the blood of his family stained his memory. But Andrew's words lit something in him, a spark he thought was gone forever. Still, in the shadows beyond the mansion walls, a black SUV idled. 3 men sat inside, their faces hidden by caps, guns resting cold on their laps. "Orders are clear," the driver muttered. "The homeless man doesn't see morning." Near midnight, Sam lay in the guest room bed Andrew had given him. The sheets were soft, but sleep refused to come. His mind wandered back to the night of the massacre, the sound of breaking glass, his wife's scream, the helpless cry of his daughter. He pressed his palms against his eyes, fighting back the tears. Then, crunch. A sound outside, footsteps on gravel. Sam sat up instantly. Years of legal training had sharpened his instincts. He crept to the window, pulling the curtain slightly. His heart skipped. 3 figures moved low across the compound, guns glinting under the security lights. "They're here for me." He grabbed his coat, slipped into the corridor, and hurried toward Andrew's room. But before he could knock, the crack of a silenced gunshot echoed. One of the guards outside dropped like a stone. Alarms blared, dogs barked, chaos erupted. Andrew burst out of his room in a robe. "What's happening?" Sam yanked him back just as another shot shattered the glass window beside them. Shards sprayed across the hall. "They're here for me," Sam shouted. "We need cover." 2 more guards stormed in, rifles ready. "Sir, get down." The intruders moved fast, scaling the compound wall. They wore black masks, eyes cold. Gunfire thundered, tearing through the night. Andrew and Sam ducked behind the staircase. "Why you?" Andrew demanded, breathless. Sam's jaw clenched. "Because I stood up in court. Because someone doesn't want me alive tomorrow." Andrew's mind raced. Johnson. It had to be him. A grenade clattered through the broken window. Sam grabbed it instinctively and hurled it back. The blast shook the compound, smoke clouding the yard. The attackers retreated slightly. Regrouping, Sam's chest heaved. The old fire that once made him a fearless lawyer surged back. But this time, it burned with survival. He turned to Andrew. "If they kill me tonight, NatTech wins tomorrow. Do you understand?" Andrew's face hardened. "Then you're not dying tonight." Together, they moved with the guards toward the panic room, hidden beneath the stairs. Bullets riddled the walls. 1 guard fell, again. Sam grabbed the fallen man's pistol and fired back. 2 attackers dropped, their screams piercing the night. The third fled into the darkness, tires screeching as the black SUV roared away. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of survivors. Andrew pressed a hand against his forehead, trembling. This is more than a lawsuit. They want us destroyed." Sam lowered the gun slowly, hands still shaking. "It was never just about the drones. This is war." By dawn, the compound was littered with bullet shells and shattered glass. Police cars lined the street, sirens wailing. Reporters swarmed, flashing cameras at the carnage. Andrew stood before them, his robe replaced with a crisp suit. He spoke firmly. "JonTech will not bow to violence. We will appear in court today, stronger than ever." Behind him, Sam stood in the same fresh shirt, bruises on his arms but eyes sharp, alive with purpose. But in the crowd, watching from behind sunglasses, Johnson clenched his jaw. He had failed to erase Sam, and now, the homeless man he hated more than anything would stand in court, not as a stranger, but as the defender who had survived the night of knives. The morning air in Lagos was thick with tension. Outside the federal high court, the streets pulsed with noise, journalists setting up cameras, protesters holding signs, curious onlookers pressing against barricades. Headlines had already spread across the nation. Assassination attempt on JonTech's defender. $1 billion case turns bloody. Who is the homeless man saving JonTech? Inside the courthouse, the air was colder. Reporters whispered. Cameras clicked. Policemen stood guard at the doors. Everyone knew this hearing was no longer about drones or patents. It was about survival, truth, and justice. Andrew walked in, head high, flanked by his aides. Beside him walked Sam, no longer in a tattered coat, but in a perfectly tailored navy suit Andrew had given him. His beard trimmed, his posture strong, his eyes sharp. He looked every inch the lawyer he once was. The crowd gasped softly. Some recognized him from the underbridge. Others whispered about the attack he had survived the night before. To them, he was already a symbol proof that truth could rise from the dirt. At the opposite table sat Jonathan Namdi, CEO of NatTech, his lips pressed thin, fingers drumming the desk. Beside him, Barrister Henry shuffled his files, and just behind them, at the defense bench, Johnson sat stiff, eyes darting. He had failed to silence Sam. Now, he would watch him stand. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." Justice Bamidele entered, his face unreadable, his robe flowing as he took his seat. "We will continue the matter between NatTech and JonTech. Counsel, proceed." Barrister Henry rose, trying to steady his voice. "My lord, while my learned friend yesterday produced a newspaper, we must not forget the heart of this matter. Nova bears uncanny resemblance to NatTech's prototype. It is too similar to be coincidence. We submit that JonTech profited off stolen work." He paused, eyeing the judge, then gestured toward Sam. And now we are asked to believe the testimony of a man who, until 2 days ago, lived under a bridge. My lord, is this justice or a circus? The gallery erupted with murmurs. Sam did not flinch. Justice Bamidele raised a hand. Order. Mr. Sam, you may respond. Sam stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight it once held. My lord, I may have slept under a bridge, but the truth is not homeless. The truth belongs in this courtroom. The crowd hushed. He lifted the same newspaper again, laying it gently on the evidence stand. This, my lord, is not fiction. It is public record. Jontech announced Project Nova a year before Mr. David resigned. It was part of their vision, long before Nattech cried theft. He turned toward Henry. And yes, Nova may resemble Nattech's prototype, but resemblance is not theft. How many cars look alike? How many phones? Innovation builds on shared ideas, but theft requires proof Nattech does not have. Sam's voice deepened. You claim one engineer's resignation destroyed an entire billion-dollar company project. Then, perhaps the theft is not Jontech's. Perhaps it is Nattech robbing Africa of progress by failing to complete what they started. In Rations Promore, gasps swept through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Andrew's chest swelled with pride. Sam faced the judge again. My lord, Nattech has not shown patents, design blueprints, or any evidence that Jontech copied their work. All they have shown is suspicion. But suspicion cannot bury the dreams of millions who depend on Jontech's innovation for safety and education. He paused, then said softly, Justice is not about who has the older company. It is about who has the truth. The courtroom was silent, hanging on his every word. Justice Bamidele adjusted his glasses. Mr. Henry, do you have evidence beyond suspicion that Jontech stole this prototype? Barrister Henry hesitated. He shuffled papers, checked files, then lowered his head. No, my lord. The gallery erupted. Journalists raised their recorders. The tension snapped like a rope. But just as relief washed over Andrew, Johnson suddenly stood. My lord, I have evidence. All eyes turned. Andrew's heart sank. Johnson pulled a flash drive from his pocket, hands trembling. Emails. Between David Okafor and Jontech executives, planning Nova before his resignation. Sam's eyes narrowed. That's impossible. The judge gestured for the bailiff to bring the drive. It was plugged into the court screen. Emails flashed messages supposedly showing David sending Nattech designs to Jontech. A collective gasp. Even Andrew paled, but Sam stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Permission to examine, my lord. He studied the screen carefully. Then he smiled. My lord, these are forged. The judge raised a brow. Explain. Sam pointed at the dates. Look closely. These supposed emails are time-stamped with American Central Standard Time. But both David and Jontech executives were in Lagos, Nigeria then. The server they used was Nigerian. Their time zone is West Africa time. Whoever forged these forgot to change the system settings. The gallery exploded in shock. Sam turned, eyes blazing. And who would benefit from planting forged emails in this court? Who panicked yesterday when truth appeared? Who hired men last night to silence me? He faced Johnson directly. It was you. A hush fell. All eyes swung to Johnson. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His lips trembled. Andrew's fists clenched. Johnson, is it true? Johnson broke. I did it. His voice cracked. I was afraid of losing my position. Afraid of being replaced by a stranger. I forged the evidence. I even sent men last night. Gasps filled the hall. Police rushed forward, grabbing him. Andrew's heart pounded, fury and betrayal twisting inside him. But before he could speak, Sam raised a hand. My lord, I ask for mercy. The judge frowned. Mercy? This man forged evidence and attempted murder. Sam's voice softened. Yes, but mercy is stronger than revenge. Johnson must face the law, but he must also be given a chance to change. Punishment without hope only creates more broken men. The gallery was silent. Even the journalists lowered their pens. Justice Bamidele studied Sam for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. This court will not ignore his crimes, but your words are noted. Hours later, the verdict came. The judge delivered his judgment. This court finds that Natek has failed to prove intellectual theft. The case is hereby dismissed for lack of merit. Jontek is free of all charges. Johnson was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for his forgery. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Andrew slumped into his seat, tears of relief rolling down his cheeks. He turned to Sam and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "You saved me. You saved Jontek. You saved thousands of dreams." Sam's eyes glistened. "I only gave truth a voice." But Andrew shook his head. "No, Sam. You gave hope a voice." In the weeks that followed, Sam's life transformed. Andrew announced publicly that Sam would head Jontek's legal department. Photos of the once homeless man in a sharp suit went viral. He became a symbol across Nigeria, a reminder that no one is too broken to rise again. At a grand conference in Abuja, Sam stood beside Andrew, speaking not just of law but of second chances. There, he met Cynthia, a journalist, covering the event. Her laughter softened his scars. Their friendship grew into love. 5 months later, their wedding was held in Lagos with music and joy. Andrew himself sponsored it, presenting Sam with keys to a mansion in Banana Island and a new Bentley. "For the man who saved my empire," Andrew said, his voice choked with emotion. When Sam and Cynthia welcomed a baby boy, Simon, 9 months later, the story came full circle. The man who had lost everything now held new life in his arms. But perhaps the most powerful moment came 2 years later. Sam visited Johnson in prison. The once proud lawyer sat broken, writing apology letters month after month. Sam laid a hand on his shoulder. "I forgive you, because forgiveness is the only thing that truly frees us." Tears streamed down Johnson's face. And when Andrew supported Sam's plea to reduce his sentence, Johnson was given a second chance, just as Sam once had been. In Lagos, people spoke of the case for years. They didn't just talk about Andrew, the billionaire who defeated Natek. They spoke about Sam, the homeless man who stood in rags, carried a newspaper, and changed everything. And in every story, the message was the same. No one is too small to change the world. What is your view about this story? If you were in Sam's shoes, would you have forgiven Johnson despite all what he did? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.